No one enters your life by accident. Carl Jung's discovery. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Every encounter, every heartbreak, every mysterious connection you've ever experienced may not be a coincidence at all, but part of a deeper spiritual design. What if the people who enter your life are not random strangers, but soul messengers and mirrors reflecting your inner journey? In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore Carl Jung's groundbreaking insight into the unseen patterns behind human connection and how understanding them can transform the way you love, heal, and grow. Have you ever met someone who changed your life forever? Was it fate or something more? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the light someone else needs today. Let's dive in. 1. People enter your life through synchronicity, not coincidence. Carl Jung once said, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see." He wasn't being poetic, he was being precise. Jung's discovery wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual. He believed that no one enters your life without a deeper reason. Every friend, every betrayer, every stranger who left an imprint, each of them emerged at a particular moment in your journey because your inner state called them in. This is what Jung called synchronicity, not mere coincidence, but meaningful alignment between your soul and the outer world. So when you think back to the woman who challenged your pride, or the friend who showed up just when you were about to fall apart, or even the competitor who triggered your deepest insecurities, ask yourself, what lesson was your soul ready to receive in that moment? These people don't just appear out of nowhere. They are mirrors, messengers, or even guides for your spiritual awakening. And in a man's life, especially as we age and face deep questions about purpose, identity, and healing, these relationships can be the catalyst that breaks the shell of the ego and pushes us towards something more authentic, more progressive. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to dismiss these moments as random. But when you stop and really reflect, you'll realize that some of the most painful or beautiful relationships are exactly what you need, even if they seem chaotic at the time. This is spiritual work, not just emotional reaction. So the next time someone stirs something inside you, don't just react. Ask yourself, is this person here to reveal something I've been ignoring in myself? The spiritually awakened man does not see people as burdens or blessings. He sees them as sacred contracts he signed before he knew what life was. And if that is true, then maybe betrayal is not a punishment, but a push. Maybe love that didn't last is not a failure, but a mirror. And maybe the person who left is just reminding you of the person you are still becoming. How would your life change if you saw every connection as part of your evolution? Let that question haunt you, because on the journey to wholeness, nothing, no one, is random. Comment below. Every connection is part of your evolution. 2. Emotional intensity signals, symbolic purpose. When someone walks into your life and stirs something deep inside you, whether it's overwhelming love, intense hatred, inexplicable fear, or even profound admiration, it's not just a coincidence. Carl Jung believed that these emotional reactions aren't random. They're signals that the person standing before you carries a symbolic purpose tied to your own inner world. In the realm of spirituality and spiritual growth, Such moments often act like mirrors, reflecting back parts of yourself you haven't yet fully understood: your hidden wounds, suppressed desires, unhealed traumas, and even the qualities you've projected onto others. Think about the last person who triggered something strong in you. Was it a friend who awoke from a childhood wound? A partner who pushed you to finally set boundaries? Or maybe a stranger whose presence left an imprint you couldn't explain? These aren't just people. They're thresholds. Their presence in your life marks a psychological and spiritual doorway that you're now ready to walk through, even if it's uncomfortable at first. I remember a man telling me about reconnecting with his estranged father after 2 decades. At first, all he felt was anger and betrayal. But as he looked deeper, he realized that his father was reflecting the abandonment issues he needed to heal in order to be a better father to his own children. That emotional intensity was not meant to punish him, but to awaken him. So the next time someone stirs up a strong emotion in you, don't just react. Stop and ask yourself, what are they trying to show me about myself? In the grand scheme of your journey, these emotional encounters are invitations to spiritual growth. They challenge you to look inward, not outward. They push you to evolve, not retreat. As Jung said, until you become conscious of your unconscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So instead of seeing emotional upheavals as something to avoid, start seeing them as a signal from your soul that you are ready to grow, to heal, and to become more whole. Because at the end of the day, no one comes into your life by accident. They come at the right time, hold up a mirror, and give you the key to unlocking the next stage of your transformation. Comment below. Everyone who has come into my life has been wonderful. 3. The people who hurt you are often the ones who heal you. According to Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom, those who trigger you the most are not accidents. They're mirrors. They reflect the parts of yourself that you've hidden, rejected, or buried. And while it may feel painful, these people are often the very ones your soul has attracted to help you grow. They don't show up to destroy you. They show up to initiate your healing. Think about it. When someone emotionally wounds you, especially in a way that feels oddly familiar or repetitive, what's really happening? You're not just being hurt, you're being reminded of a past wound that never fully healed. From Jung's perspective, these encounters serve as a kind of spiritual surgery. They cut you open, not out of cruelty, but so that what's been festering in the dark can be exposed to the light. This is the heart of shadow work, facing the unhealed, unacknowledged, and uncomfortable truths that live within you. And these people, whether they're friends, lovers, family members, or even strangers, act as catalysts. They don't just push your buttons. They reveal where the buttons are located in the first place. But here's the twist. Many of us spend years trying to avoid pain, reject discomfort, or blame the other person, without ever asking the deeper question, what is this trying to show me about myself? And that question right there is the key that unlocks transformation. Spiritual awakening doesn't always come through love and light. Often, it comes through grief, betrayal, heartbreak, and emotional chaos. Yet in hindsight, those are the moments that change you most. They force you to either collapse or rise. They force you to meet parts of yourself you never knew were there. They force you to grow in ways comfort never could. What if the one who hurt you was also the one who awakened your inner healer? What if their role wasn't to love you forever, but to shake you so deeply that you finally return to yourself? That shift from victim to student is the exact path Carl Jung walked and taught. He believed that each emotional wound holds within it a message, a lesson, a mirror, and a map back to your wholeness. So, the next time someone triggers your soul, instead of reacting in anger or shutting down, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What wound is being brought to the surface? What part of me is asking to be seen, accepted, and healed? You see, spiritual wisdom is not about escaping pain. It's about understanding it. It's about realizing that even the most difficult relationships can be sacred contracts in disguise. And once you understand that, everything shifts. You begin to see life not as random, but as intricately designed for your growth. So let me ask you, who in your life has hurt you, but also awakened something in you? And are you willing to see them not as the villain in your story, but as a messenger in your spiritual journey? Leave a comment and share what this brought up for you. The more we reflect, the more we grow. And as Carl Jung would say, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. The psyche sends people. When you're ready, not when you want. When it comes to relationships, especially the most transformative ones, they often arrive not when you're chasing them, but when you've grown enough to hold them. You might think you're ready for that partnership, mentor, or challenge, but spiritual awakening doesn't respond to your schedule. It follows your soul's timeline. The psyche, as Jung discovered, does not deal in convenience. It deals in readiness. That person you met after a breakup, that unexpected friendship at your lowest point, or even the sudden reappearance of someone from your past, these are not accidents. They are psychological and spiritual alignments that arrive with surgical precision to mirror your growth, push your edges, and guide you toward the next layer of truth within yourself. This is not about romance or fate in the Hollywood sense. It's about spiritual timing, when your unconscious has ripened through enough internal tension or suffering. The right person appears to activate the lesson. And sometimes the lesson hurts. But pain, as any man over 30 knows, can be the greatest spiritual teacher. Think about how many times you've said, "If only I met this person sooner," without realizing you weren't yet the man who could understand, appreciate, or even endure what that relationship would demand. The universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you who you need to meet at the moment your soul can handle them. This is the spiritual law behind why some relationships seem to explode with impact and meaning. They're not casual. They are archetypal meetings embedded with deep unconscious significance. Jung called these encounters numinous, charged with energy that cracks open parts of the self that have been asleep for years. So let me ask you, are you really paying attention to the people showing up in your life? Are you dismissing them as random? Or are you brave enough to ask, what part of me is being awakened by this person? That's the key to spiritual wisdom. Recognizing that life is not happening to you, but through you. Each soul that crosses your path is a messenger. and until you learn to decode the message, the lesson will repeat. For men walking the path of purpose, especially between the ages of 30 and 65, this becomes even more crucial. At this stage, life is less about conquest and more about meaning. The more you awaken, the more the universe sends you relationships that challenge your ego but nourish your soul. This is not a coincidence. This is spiritual precision. So the next time someone stirs up your emotions, ask yourself what your subconscious is trying to tell you. Because whether it is a heartbreak or a helping hand, that person did not come here by accident. They are the spark your soul is ready to receive. Comment below, I am ready to receive. 5. Archetypes shape the people you attract. What if I told you that the people who show up in your life, whether they lift you up, break your heart, challenge your beliefs, or leave quietly, are not here by mistake, but by design? According to Carl Jung's discovery, no one enters your life by accident. And this truth becomes even more powerful when you begin to understand the invisible forces behind it. Forces like archetypes that live deep within your psyche. These archetypes aren't just abstract ideas. They are living patterns of energy, universal roles, embedded in the collective unconscious that shape the kind of people you attract. Have you ever noticed a recurring type of person in your life? Maybe you constantly attract partners who need saving, or friends who remind you of someone from your past. This is no coincidence. The lover, the wounded child, the savior, the shadow. These aren't just characters in mythology or psychology books. They're mirrors of the unresolved aspects within you. Each person who enters your life, especially those who stir strong emotional reactions, is often reflecting an archetype that needs to be acknowledged, healed, or reintegrated into your conscious self. Let's take the wounded child, for example. If you find yourself constantly drawn to people who seem broken or fragile, it might be your own inner child seeking attention, love, and healing through them. Or if you're always stepping into the role of the savior, trying to fix everyone, maybe it's time to ask, what part of me feels powerless unless I'm rescuing someone else? Archetypes are not just concepts. They are spiritual contracts written in the language of your soul's growth. Think about this. Have you ever ended a relationship only to realize that person taught you exactly what you needed to know about your boundaries, self-worth, or emotional wounds? That's not an accident. That's the spiritual wisdom encoded in these connections. And while it may not always be pleasant, sometimes it hurts, sometimes it devastates you, the growth that follows is undeniable. Let me tell you a story. A man in his early 40s once shared how he kept attracting women who cheated on him. At first, he thought he was just unlucky. But after therapy and deep reflection, he realized he was reenacting a wound from childhood, his mother's abandonment. The women weren't just betraying him. They were mirroring his unresolved pain, forcing him to confront it so he could finally heal. Once he did, those patterns disappeared, and he met someone entirely different who reflected his healed self. So let me ask you, what kinds of people keep entering your life? What roles do they play? What emotions do they awaken in you? These aren't random events. They are invitations to deeper self-awareness, healing, and ultimately, spiritual growth. Every connection is an echo from your inner world, a sacred opportunity to remember, retrieve, and reintegrate forgotten parts of yourself. That is the essence of true spirituality, awakening the hidden wisdom in relationships and using them as a mirror for your own evolution. So the next time someone enters your life, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to show me about myself?" Because that question is the beginning of a spiritual awakening, an awakening that turns pain into purpose and confusion into clarity. Comment below. I choose spiritual awakening. 6. Repetition is a signal, not a curse. Have you ever wondered why you keep attracting the same type of person into your life? Perhaps it's someone emotionally unavailable, someone narcissistic, or someone who always seems to wound you in the same exact way. You might think it's just bad luck or coincidence, but Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in modern psychology, offered a deeper explanation grounded in spiritual wisdom. He introduced the concept of repetition compulsion, a pattern where your unconscious mind recreates familiar emotional experiences, not to punish you, but to heal you. In Jung's own words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What this means is that the people you meet, especially the ones who seem to trigger deep emotional pain or confusion, aren't random strangers. They're mirrors, showing you parts of yourself that still need attention, healing, and transformation. The universe, through the lens of spiritual wisdom, doesn't waste experiences. It sends you messengers again and again until you wake up and recognize the pattern not as a curse, but as a calling. You're not just unlucky in love or friendship. You are being offered a spiritual assignment, an invitation to look inward, to trace the emotional blueprint that keeps recreating these connections. It's not about finding the right person to break the cycle. The truth is, you become the right person by becoming conscious. Every repetitive connection is a whisper from your soul asking, "Are you ready to heal now?" And the moment you say yes, the moment you decide to pause and reflect rather than react, the pattern begins to dissolve. Think about it. What if that person who broke your heart was actually your teacher in disguise, helping you discover the places where you've abandoned yourself? What if your greatest pain is secretly your path to power? Can you recall a relationship that felt like déjà vu, like you'd lived it before, only with different faces and different names? And if so, what lesson did it come to teach you? You see, Jung didn't believe in coincidences. He believed in synchronicities, meaningful connections between your inner world and the events of your life. So when life keeps giving you the same experience over and over again, it's not the world being cruel. It's the universe being precise. You're being shown exactly what needs to be transformed within you. This pattern is the portal. And once you step through it with awareness, you're no longer drawing from your wounds, you're drawing from your wisdom. So today, instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" ask, "What part of me is ready to grow beyond this?" Because ultimately, as spiritual wisdom teaches us, repetition isn't a punishment. It's the soul's way of opening you up to something greater. Comment below, "I'm open to the greater." 7. You attract what you are, not what you want. They say you don't get what you want, you get who you are. And Carl Jung, the great pioneer of analytical psychology, would have wholeheartedly agreed. In the realm of spiritual awakening, there's a powerful truth that often gets overlooked by those who focus solely on ambition and desire. Your life doesn't respond to what you consciously wish for. It mirrors the energy you unconsciously emit. Your emotional frequency is like a tuning fork that vibrates outward, attracting people and experiences that resonate with your current inner state, not your surface-level goals. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I keep meeting the same kind of people, facing the same heartbreaks, or repeating the same toxic cycles? The answer isn't fate or bad luck. It's resonance. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about becoming aware of how your unresolved wounds, suppressed anger, or fear of intimacy silently shape your relationships. If your inner life is rooted in past trauma or subconscious insecurity, no matter how much you crave peace or healthy love, you'll likely draw in what matches your current energetic blueprint, not what your intellect says you want. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's not just a philosophical idea. It's a spiritual wake-up call. Many men live decades unaware of the energetic patterns they've inherited or absorbed from absent fathers, broken trust, or years of emotional suppression. And as a result, they unconsciously recreate familiar pain because, on a deep level, it feels normal. But here's the powerful shift. The moment you begin doing the inner work, whether that means therapy, honest reflection, spiritual practice, or simply learning to sit with your emotions without numbing them, you begin to raise your frequency. And once you change the internal signal, the external reality must follow. You stop magnetizing people who wound you and start attracting those who help you heal. You stop repeating stories of abandonment and start writing chapters of authentic connection. This transformation isn't instant, but it's inevitable when you commit to it. So ask yourself, what emotional frequency am I operating at today? What am I unconsciously inviting into my life? And more importantly, am I willing to evolve so that I can finally receive what I truly desire? Not just in love, but in friendship, purpose, and peace. This is spiritual work, not self-help platitudes. It is about taking back your power by becoming aware of the invisible forces that shape your world. Finally, the spiritual wisdom of Carl Jung reminds us that people don't just show up in your life by chance. They are attracted to the energy you carry. Shift your energy, and everything else will begin to shift. Comment below. I attract high-value people. 8. Every encounter has symbolic meaning, even if it ends. Have you ever wondered why someone showed up in your life only to walk away later, leaving behind a trail of questions, pain, or even growth? Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This speaks to the spiritual truth that no one enters your life by accident. Every person, whether they stay or go, brings with them a purpose often hidden from our conscious mind, but deeply meaningful to our soul's evolution. You may have experienced a relationship that ended without closure, or a friendship that faded without reason. It's easy to view these endings through the lens of loss. But what if I told you they were actually sacred completions designed to serve your spiritual growth? When someone leaves after their role is fulfilled, your ego may interpret it as abandonment or rejection. Yet from a soul perspective, their exit is part of a divine script, a closing chapter that makes space for your becoming. It's like a teacher who appears only for a single lesson and then disappears, not because they didn't care, but because their purpose was never meant to be permanent. Think about someone who once meant the world to you, who helped you feel alive, but eventually hurt you or walked away. At the time, it may have felt like failure, but looking back, can you see how that very person awakened something in you? A new boundary, a deeper self-worth, a call to healing? One man shared how the woman he loved the most also broke him the most. But through that heartbreak, he stopped outsourcing his value and began the journey back to himself. He now sees that relationship not as a mistake, but as a sacred initiation. This is the essence of spirituality, not to avoid pain, but to see its purpose, to recognize that every connection has symbolic meaning, even if it doesn't last. So I ask you, who has entered your life and left, yet shaped you in ways you're only now beginning to understand? What if your heartbreaks weren't curses, but catalysts for spiritual growth? In the end, the lesson is this: trust the rhythm of your life. Trust that every encounter, no matter how brief or painful, is woven into the fabric of your becoming. And when someone leaves, don't cling in despair. Instead, bless them for playing their part in your transformation and step forward with the wisdom they helped unlock in you. Because true growth is not about holding on to everything, but about understanding the meaning in what we release. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored in this video, Carl Jung's powerful insight reveals that no one enters your life by accident. Each person is a mirror, a messenger, or a spiritual contract guiding you toward deeper self-awareness. Whether they bring love or pain, every soul you meet plays a role in your evolution. By recognizing this hidden pattern, you can approach your relationships with more compassion, clarity, and purpose. At Spiritual Wisdom, we believe that growth begins with awareness. So how has this perspective shifted the way you view your past or present connections? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this message resonated with your journey. Are you an intuitive introvert? Carl Jung left a message just for you. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt that the most important truths don't come from the outside world, but rise from deep within? In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore Carl Jung's powerful message for intuitive introverts, a message that reminds us that our inner fantasies, our private visions, and our quiet insights are not meaningless illusions, but living energies capable of shaping reality itself. What if your inner world is not a weakness, but your greatest power? If you've ever felt misunderstood, spiritually deep, or uniquely intuitive, this message is for you. Apply these insights to your daily life and watch how clarity, growth, and happiness begin to unfold. Drop a comment below. How do you relate to Jung's idea that fantasy is a form of energy? Do your inner images shape your outer world? Let's start a soul-level conversation. 1. Fantasy is real and powerful. Carl Jung's Spiritual Wisdom pierces through the noise of the modern world to deliver a timeless truth. What most people call fantasy, he called psychic fact. If you're an intuitive introvert, you've likely been told that your inner world is just imagination, something to be dismissed. But Jung challenges this, urging you to see that the vivid images within your mind are not only real, they're powerful. These inner visions, often brushed off by the world as illusions, are actually energetic blueprints of potential and transformation. In a society obsessed with productivity and visible results, this insight is revolutionary. Jung viewed fantasy as a form of energy, a tangible force that, although it cannot be weighed or touched, carries weight in the spiritual realm and manifests in the material world. When you see a bridge, a home, a symphony, or a novel, remember, they were once someone's fantasy. Your intuitive mind doesn't just daydream. It shapes reality before reality exists. That's the essence of spiritual awakening, realizing that what you feel and sense internally is not less than reality. It precedes it. In our modern lives, filled with distractions, constant notifications, and pressure to conform, intuitive introverts often find themselves doubting their inner voice. But Jung reminds you that your fantasies are sacred messages, forms of spiritual communication that carry a kind of truth too subtle for the five senses. This is especially important for men between 30 and 65, those in the heart of their life's responsibilities, where practical thinking often overtakes inner vision. If you've ever silenced your spiritual intuition for the sake of being rational or reliable, it's time to reclaim the forgotten wisdom that your internal world is not a weakness, it's a compass. In moments when you sense something is off, when a dream lingers, when a creative idea sparks but seems too impractical, pause. These are not distractions. They are invitations. Invitations to explore the deeper layers of yourself and align with a path that is both meaningful and true. So the next time your mind drifts into fantasy, don't dismiss it. Ask yourself, what truth is trying to reach me? What energy is asking to be made real through me? Your spiritual awakening is not about escaping reality, but about integrating the invisible into your daily decisions. Jung's insight is not just psychological. It is a call to trust the energy of your inner world. In a culture that values logic over intuition, external evidence over inner knowing, Jung reminds you that the most powerful transformations begin not with action, but with honoring the silent image that flashes through your mind. Because that image, it's not just fantasy. It's spiritual energy asking to be formed. Let it guide you. Let it awaken you. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I started taking my inner world as seriously as my outer world? It's not just self-questioning. It's the beginning of real power. Comment below, I embrace this power. 2. Introverted intuition focuses on the inner world. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." If you're someone who often finds yourself drawn inward, towards a quiet world filled with symbols, feelings, and deep impressions, you might be tapping into what Jung called introverted intuition. This isn't just a personality quirk. It's a spiritual compass guiding you beneath the surface of things. Introverted intuition, as Jung described it, is a way of seeing beyond the noise of the outside world. It focuses not on facts and appearances, but on symbolic images, archetypes, and hidden meanings that emerge from the unconscious. In a society that often rewards extroversion and fast decision-making, being an intuitive introvert can feel like living in a different dimension. You may not always have the words to explain what you sense, but you just know when something is off, or when something deeper is trying to speak through the moment. That's not a weakness. That's spiritual growth in motion. You're not just thinking. You're listening to something timeless inside you. Let's say you're sitting with a friend, and they're telling you about a new job they're excited about. Everyone around them is cheering, but something inside you tugs. There's no clear reason why, but you sense that something doesn't sit right. Later, it turns out the company had hidden issues. You didn't have proof, but you had perception. This is how introverted intuition works. It quietly unpacks spiritual truths long before they're revealed to the world. It's the subtle voice of your soul, trying to keep you aligned. In a modern world, flooded with distractions, notifications, and quick answers, people who rely on introverted intuition often feel like outsiders. But maybe that's because they're tuned into a different channel, the one broadcasting messages meant for those on a path of inner discovery. And here's the question I want to ask you. How often do you trust your inner knowing, even when it doesn't make logical sense? How often do you give yourself permission to pause, reflect, and let your spiritual compass guide you rather than chasing clarity in the chaos? If you're nodding quietly to yourself right now, then Jung's message was meant for you. He believed that the intuitive introvert is someone who doesn't just perceive the world, they feel its soul, its unconscious motivations, its symbolic truths. You might not talk much about what you see, but it shapes your life in ways others will never understand. So, what's the takeaway? If you are an intuitive introvert, don't let the world convince you that your spiritual depth is impractical or strange. It's not. In fact, it might be the very thing the world needs more of: people who can pause, feel, discern, and connect with life on a soul level. Use this gift, hone it, let it guide your relationships, your decisions, and your personal healing. Spirituality isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it whispers through intuition, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. That someone might be you. And if that resonates, ask yourself, what inner truth have I been ignoring that might actually be the key to my next chapter? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 3. Society misunderstands intuitive introverts. Have you ever felt like your thoughts run so deep that words just can't capture them? Like there's a rich inner world inside you, full of insight and vision, but the moment you try to speak it out loud, it gets lost in translation? If so, you're not alone and you're not broken. You might just be an intuitive introvert. And Carl Jung had something deeply important to say to people like you. In a world that rewards loud voices, fast reactions, and visible achievement, those who live more internally, who see life through symbols, emotions, and subtle energies are often misunderstood, overlooked, or even labeled as strange. But Jung, the father of analytical psychology, knew better. He once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This quote captures the essence of spiritual wisdom for intuitive introverts. Your inner life is not just valid, it's sacred. You see, Society often praises extroversion as the standard for success. People are expected to be sociable, quick, assertive, and expressive. But intuitive introverts don't operate on that frequency. Their energy is more subtle, like the wind moving beneath the surface of water. They experience truth, not just through logic, but through deep knowing, through dreams, archetypes, and quiet inner revelations. And yet, this depth is rarely acknowledged or appreciated. Think about it. Have you ever shared a profound inner insight only to be met with blank stares or polite nods? That sense of being too much or too weird can create emotional distance and alienation, making it hard for intuitive introverts to find a true sense of belonging. But spiritual wisdom reminds us that not all gifts are meant to be loud. Some are meant to be still, quiet, and transformative, just like you. Carl Jung taught that intuitive types access the unconscious in a way others cannot. Their minds are wired to pick up on patterns, hidden meanings, and symbolic truths. But the real challenge comes in articulating this inner world to people who don't perceive reality the same way. This is where the disconnect happens, where intuitive introverts may be seen as aloof, vague, or even irrational. But Jung didn't see them that way. He saw them as seekers, alchemists of the soul, carrying a torch of inner truth in a world that often favors surface over depth. Isn't it time we started honoring that? Isn't it time you started honoring that within yourself? So let me ask you this. What would change in your life if you stopped trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for you? What would it feel like to trust your inner voice, even when no one else understands it? This is the beginning of spiritual awakening, the moment when you realize your intuitive nature is not a flaw, but a calling. Carl Jung believed that wholeness comes from integration, not imitation. That means your path isn't about becoming more like them. It's about becoming more like you. So if you've ever felt spiritually homesick, as if your soul is waiting to be seen, perhaps this is your calling. The world may not always understand intuitive introverts, but that doesn't mean your inner vision is wrong. In fact, it may be more true than anything you can say. Trust it, nurture it, share it with those who truly understand, because your inner world is not just a refuge, it is your gift to the world. And that, my friend, is spiritual wisdom. Carl Jung's true wisdom. Comment below. I trust and nurture it. 4. The weight of symbolic insight. Have you ever walked into a room and sensed something was off before a single word was spoken? That's not a coincidence. That's the quiet language of intuition. And for men who identify as intuitive introverts, Carl Jung believed this wasn't just personality, it was spiritual design. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This awakening, however, doesn't always come with clarity. It often arrives as symbols, metaphors, and unspoken knowing that the world barely understands. Unlike extroverted types who anchor their reality in the tangible, the measurable, and the seen, intuitive introverts live in a different dimension altogether, one built from shifting symbolic images, emotional truths, and archetypal meaning. They move not from fact to fact, but from vision to insight, decoding universal truths that others may miss completely. This is where the journey of spiritual awakening begins, not through noise, but through inner clarity. Carl Jung observed that intuitive introverts are often deeply absorbed in the realm of the symbolic. They are not distracted. They are tuned into a different frequency, a spiritual one, while others may see their quietness as aloofness or label their intense focus on the invisible as mystical or eccentric. The reality is they're reading life through a different lens. These individuals are constantly interpreting dreams, sensing undercurrents in relationships, and picking up on patterns that transcend the present moment. They're not just reflective, they're prophetic in the way they carry meaning. Yet there's a challenge. Because their dominant mode of processing bypasses physical sensation, they often suppress the practical or material aspects of life. That means while they might have a profound vision about the purpose of life, they may struggle to fix a leaking sink or meet a deadline without feeling internally fragmented. This doesn't make them flawed. It makes them wired for a different kind of contribution. In a world that often demands fast answers, visible results, and constant motion, these men can feel like misfits. But Jung's message to you is this: your spiritual gifts are not meant to be understood by everyone. They are meant to awaken the few who are ready. Your ability to sit in silence, to interpret symbols, and to hold emotional truths without running from them, that is sacred. And in a modern culture that is becoming increasingly loud, distracted, and disconnected from depth, your presence is needed now more than ever. But let me ask you something. Are you honoring your spiritual nature, or are you still trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for you? So if you've ever been accused of being too dreamy, too internal, or too intense, know this: you are not broken. You are spiritually awake in a world that is still asleep. Your insights may not be measurable, but they are meaningful. And the path forward is not to explain yourself louder, but to walk your path deeper. Jung's message wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual. The weight of symbolic insight is heavy, but it is also holy. Let that truth guide your steps today. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 5. They are often misjudged as strange or detached. Have you ever felt like people completely misunderstood you, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say? If you're an intuitive introvert, Carl Jung believed your inner world holds more truth than any external validation, and yet that same rich inner life can make others label you as strange, detached, or even aloof. But let's get one thing clear. This is not a flaw. It's a spiritual trait. You process life through images, symbols, and sensations that don't always make sense to the outside world. But that doesn't mean they aren't powerful. In fact, Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." That inward gaze, so natural to intuitive introverts, is the very gateway to spiritual growth. But here's the challenge. Because your communication is episodic, symbolic, and emotionally nuanced, it often gets misread. People see your stillness and assume you're cold. They observe your silence and think you're disinterested. They notice you drifting into thought and believe you're lost in fantasy. What they don't see is the rich inner dialogue you're constantly having, an unfolding of insights, patterns, and subtle truths that others might miss completely. Let me share a story to bring this to life. A man named Daniel a quiet graphic designer in his mid-30s, was constantly labeled as off by his coworkers. He didn't engage in small talk, rarely joined team lunches, and seemed to live in his own world. What they didn't know was that Daniel had a vivid, intuitive mind. He was constantly thinking in symbols, colors, and abstract connections. One day, when a major project was about to collapse due to a lack of creative direction, Daniel stepped up. He presented a design that didn't just solve the problem, it elevated the entire brand. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was spiritually aligned, symbolically rich, and deeply intuitive. Suddenly, the same colleagues who once labeled him as strange were now calling him a genius. So what changed? Not Daniel, but their perception of what depth truly looks like. This brings us to a question I want you to sit with. How often have you suppressed your inner wisdom just to appear more normal? And at what cost? You see, intuitive introverts are not here to blend in. You're here to see what others miss, to feel what others ignore, and to bring forth ideas and insights that are rooted in a higher awareness. But for this to happen, you must stop shrinking yourself for the comfort of others. The world doesn't need more surface-level chatter. It needs your depth, your symbolism, your spiritual clarity. If your energy is often misread, let it be misread. If your silence makes people uncomfortable, let it. Because in your stillness lies wisdom, and in your detachment lies vision. Jung's teachings remind us that the most significant forms of transformation don't begin in the spotlight. They start in the shadows of solitude. So here's the lesson for you. Spiritual growth doesn't always look like grand statements or social integration. Sometimes it looks like walking alone with clarity, speaking in symbols that only a few understand, and choosing depth over performance. Don't be afraid of being misunderstood. Be afraid of betraying your inner truth. Because the path of the intuitive introvert is not just about personality, it's about purpose. And if you listen closely, your soul is already leading the way. Comment below. I listen to my soul. 6. Introverted intuition holds prophetic power. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This powerful idea brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of spiritual wisdom and psychology, the function known as introverted intuition, which Jung believed holds the key to perceiving the invisible threads of fate and meaning that others often overlook. If you're an intuitive introvert, you may have felt at times that you just knew something before it happened, not through logic, but through a quiet inner certainty. Jung referred to this phenomenon as accessing the numinous dimension of the unconscious, where symbolic truths, archetypes, and spiritual insights live and move beyond the boundaries of rational thought. Introverted intuition is not just about thinking deeply. It's about sensing patterns that haven't yet fully formed in the outer world. It's like reading the emotional or energetic blueprint of what is to come. You may not be able to explain why you feel something is about to shift, but you feel it in your bones, in your dreams, in the images that float across your inner vision. While others rely on tangible data, you move through life guided by unseen cues, gut feelings, and symbolic flashes that seem almost prophetic, though they may not make sense to others until much later. Have you ever had a dream or sudden insight that came true weeks or even months later? Have you found yourself understanding someone's soul without them ever speaking a word? If so, you're not alone, and it's not a coincidence. Jung understood this as part of the deeper structure of the psyche, what he called the collective unconscious, a realm that all humans tap into. But intuitive introverts experience more vividly. This inner realm speaks in symbols, visions, and sudden knowing, and it can guide you like a spiritual compass if you learn to trust it. The challenge, of course, is that the world often dismisses what can't be seen or measured, leaving intuitive individuals feeling isolated, even misunderstood. But the truth is, this form of inner knowing is a sacred gift. It's part of your spiritual awakening, your invitation to live not just by logic, but by a deeper connection to life's unfolding mystery. The question is, are you honoring these intuitive whispers, or are you pushing them aside because they don't fit the usual mold? Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that not everything that is true is immediately demonstrable, and not everything that is demonstrable is deeply meaningful. So the next time you feel something stirring inside you, stop, listen, and ask yourself, what truth is trying to come through me? In a world that celebrates noise and speed, the quiet knowing within may be just the voice we need. Let it speak. Comment below. I listen to my inner voice. 7. The burden of solitude and incommunicability. There's a hidden burden that many intuitive introverts carry, a silent weight few ever notice but deeply feel. And it's the burden of seeing more than they can say. Carl Jung once observed, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." For the intuitive man, this inward gaze is not just a preference, it's a calling, a sacred blueprint for his spiritual awakening. You begin to see patterns others overlook, feel energies that are dismissed as nonsense, and envision possibilities long before they arrive. But what happens when you try to articulate what you've seen? Often, words fall short. You speak, and people tilt their heads in confusion. You share a glimpse of your vision, and others label it too abstract, too dreamy, too much. So you retreat not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. You learn that silence protects the sacred, and solitude becomes a sanctuary. Yet here lies the paradox. This inner depth that grants you profound spiritual insight can also isolate you from the world you live in. You walk through life as if you're in it, but not of it. While others bond over surface-level conversation, you long for depth, for meaning, for conversations that touch the soul, not just skim the surface. And this incommunicability becomes both your strength and your struggle. On one hand, it sharpens your intuition and fuels your creative insight. On the other, it separates you from those who can't meet you at that depth. In modern life, this often shows up in boardrooms, relationships, and even friendships, where your inner clarity feels like a foreign language. But what if this solitude isn't a curse, but a necessary crucible for transformation? What if being misunderstood is actually the universe's way of keeping your vision protected until the world is ready? The intuitive introvert is not broken. He is simply tuned into a frequency that not everyone can hear. You are not here to conform. You are here to awaken. And your spiritual path isn't one of noise, but of discernment. So instead of shrinking to fit into shallow spaces, honor your depth. Channel your insight into your work, your art, your presence. The world may not always understand you, but the right people, those with eyes to see and hearts to feel, will recognize your light without explanation. Have you ever felt this tension between your inner knowing and the inability of the outside world to receive it? It is not your failure. It is your calling to rise. Because your solitude is not absence, but preparation. Your silence is not emptiness, but sacred space. And your journey, though quiet, is incredibly loud in the spiritual realm. This is not the time to doubt your design. This is the time to strengthen your faith in the invisible path that is unfolding within you. So take a breath, stand firm in your truth, and know that your inner world is not so much. It is the birthplace of something eternal. That, my friend, is the sign of a man who is not only introverted, but also spiritually awakened. Comment below. I choose spiritual awakening. 8. Their lives are their message. What if I told you that your quiet presence, your depth, your sensitivity to the unseen are not weaknesses, but spiritual strengths that the world desperately needs? Carl Jung once said, "Their lives are their message." And in that one sentence, he captured the essence of intuitive introverts. You may not always feel the urge to speak loudly or debate logically, and that's not because you're lacking something. It's because you're tuned into a different kind of truth. You live through meaning, you communicate through energy, and you teach through being. Your life itself becomes a quiet revolution against a world obsessed with noise and spectacle. This is the spiritual path of those who embody an alternative way of knowing and being one, rooted in intuition, reflection, and depth. In today's society, where attention spans are shorter than ever and external achievement is worshipped, people often overlook the richness of the inner world. But spiritual growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in silence, in solitude, and in deep inner listening. Just think about a person in your life who doesn't talk much, but when they do, every word feels like it matters. Or someone who lives so authentically that just being around them shifts your perspective. That's the kind of quiet impact Jung was pointing to. And maybe that's you. Maybe your gift isn't to teach with a microphone, but with presence, with how you treat others, how you remain grounded when chaos erupts, or how you seek truth even when it's uncomfortable. Let me tell you a quick story. There's a man I once knew who worked as a janitor at a school. He barely said a word to anyone, but every student respected him deeply. He would leave little notes of encouragement in the hallways, pick up trash without being asked, and somehow always knew when someone needed a smile. No one ever saw him preaching or teaching, but in a way, he taught more about kindness, responsibility, and spiritual grace than many professional speakers. His life was the message, and that's what Jung was getting at. In the heart of every intuitive introvert is a spiritual compass quietly guiding their steps, not to be popular, but to be purposeful. Not to be seen, but to see deeply. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever felt that your way of being is different from what society expects, but quietly powerful in its own way? Could it be that your very existence is a form of spiritual teaching? If so, perhaps you're here not to fit in, but to guide others through your example. As you reflect on this, I want you to remember that spiritual growth doesn't always look like loud breakthroughs or grand transformations. Sometimes it's about living in alignment with your truth, even when no one is watching. Your life lived with depth, empathy, and quiet integrity is a sacred contribution to this world. Never underestimate that. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe your way of living can be a message in itself? Let's grow together through this journey of introspection and silent wisdom. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 9. Most people are a mix of types. Let's talk about something Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in psychology, wanted us to understand deeply. Most people are not just one type. In fact, Jung emphasized that purely intuitive introverts are quite rare. Instead, he explained that we are all made up of a unique combination of psychological functions. You might primarily lead with intuition, but that doesn't mean your personality is fully defined by it. According to Jung's theory of psychological types, every person has a dominant function, like intuition, that takes the lead in how they see the world and make decisions. But there's always a secondary or auxiliary function, like thinking, feeling, or sensing, that plays a powerful supporting role, helping to create a more stable, flexible, and balanced inner life. This mix of internal traits forms the psychological blueprint of how we operate in the world. And here's where spiritual wisdom comes in, because once you begin to understand your dominant and auxiliary functions, you don't just gain insight into your personality. You begin to unlock the deeper layers of your soul's design. Isn't it powerful to consider that your inner wiring is not random, but purposeful? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become who you are if you haven't learned the tools to decode your inner architecture? If you're an intuitive introvert, you may often feel misunderstood, even by yourself. You might sense things others miss, feel deeply connected to symbols and meanings that are hard to express, or get overwhelmed in environments that lack depth. But maybe the reason you're overwhelmed isn't because you're broken. Maybe it's because you've only been taught to look at yourself through a narrow lens. Jung's spiritual wisdom invites us to view our personalities like instruments, each with unique tuning. And when the dominant and auxiliary functions play in harmony, life begins to sound like music instead of noise. Now let's ground this idea in something relatable. Have you ever met someone who was extremely analytical, but surprisingly empathetic in the way they listen? Or maybe you know someone who's deeply imaginative, yet unusually practical. That's not a contradiction. It's a perfect example of Jung's theory in action. These are people who have a dominant function, like intuition or thinking, but also a complementary one that balances them out. So instead of asking, "Am I an intuitive introvert or something else entirely?" perhaps the real question is, what are the other inner tools I've been gifted that I haven't explored yet? This opens the door to self-acceptance and growth rather than boxing yourself into a single identity. The beauty of Carl Jung's message is that it's not just about labeling yourself, it's about awakening. It's about discovering the patterns in your inner world and learning to live more intentionally and peacefully. When you understand your personality mix, you begin to see how you respond to stress, what energizes you, how you connect with others, and what your soul truly desires. And from there, spiritual awakening begins not through major external events, but through quiet self-awareness. So how clear are you about the functions that guide your decisions, relationships, and dreams? And more importantly, are you willing to explore the less dominant parts of yourself to achieve true balance? Because in doing so, you not only understand your personality, but you also step into a more fulfilling version of your life purpose. Comment below. I step into my full version of myself. 10. Final insight. Intuition is the voice of the unconscious. Have you ever had a gut feeling about something? A quiet inner voice that spoke before logic could catch up, guiding you through life's murkier moments? That, my friend, is not just instinct. Carl Jung called it perception via the unconscious, the essence of intuition. And if you're an intuitive introvert, you've been given a rare and powerful tool that many ignore or dismiss. In a world driven by data, speed, and external validation, Jung's message still rings true today. Your ability to access the invisible is not a flaw. It's the very proof of a deep spiritual intelligence that's awakening within you. While others chase certainty in the external, you are quietly tuned to something far older and wiser than your inner world. Jung didn't see intuition as mere fantasy. He saw it as a function of the unconscious, the part of the psyche that holds ancient memory, symbolic truth, and untapped potential. It is often in times of crisis or confusion, when facts fail and logic breaks down, that this inner compass rises and whispers the path forward. Have you noticed that? In the silence between your thoughts. Have you ever sensed a direction forming before you had words for it? That's not your imagination. It's your soul speaking. Many men live half alive because they've been taught to silence their intuition, to ignore their spiritual senses in favor of cold facts. But here's the truth. Real strength comes from knowing when to listen to the unseen. Jung believed that the unconscious mind isn't a dark basement to be feared. It's a vast inner temple filled with sacred guidance, creativity, and spiritual energy. To walk through life without honoring that voice is to miss the very core of your spiritual awakening. And yet, society has conditioned us to believe that intuition is irrational, that feelings are distractions, and that stillness is laziness. But what if your quiet moments of reflection, your solitude, and your deep knowing are actually the birthplace of transformation? As Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Your spiritual path begins not in noise, but in awareness, and your intuition is the torch that lights the way. Let's be honest. We live in a time where emotional numbness is praised as stoicism, and outward performance is mistaken for purpose. But intuitive men sense that something deeper calls them. If you're one of them, you are not weak. You are on the verge of a breakthrough. Your gift lies in feeling the truth before it's visible, in seeing patterns others miss, and in trusting the invisible thread of meaning that weaves through your life. So let me ask you this. How would your life change if you started honoring your intuition not as a vague feeling, but as a sacred message from your unconscious? What if instead of silencing your inner voice, you strengthened it with stillness, reflection, and spiritual practice? The world doesn't need more noise. It needs men who are deeply rooted, spiritually awake, and brave enough to follow their inner compass. Intuition isn't a luxury, it's a necessity in a world that has lost its way. And in your journey as a man, it may just be the most trustworthy guide you'll ever have. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we come to the end of this journey into Carl Jung's message for intuitive introverts, remember, your inner world is not a weakness, but a compass. Jung's insights into the introvert-extrovert spectrum are not rigid categories, but guiding maps to help us better understand our own psychological landscape. Whether you lead with intuition, sensation, or thought, it's about embracing how your mind uniquely processes the world and using that awareness to grow. At Spiritual Wisdom, we believe self-understanding is the foundation of spiritual awakening and personal happiness. So how do Jung's ideas resonate with your own inner life? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this message spoke to you. Your journey of spiritual growth begins with a single step inward.